Hail America. Hail victory. Now, as society, we've gotten so conditioned to feminism that what I'm about to say is going to be deemed as misogynistic and hateful. And let it be. Let it be, right? Let it be. Um, the women's rights movement has failed our country. And it's a big part of what's brought our nation to its knees and where we're at today. Now, we are going to turn it around. We are going to turn it around, but just the idea that we should take women's suffrage and take their right to vote away, it's going to trigger a lot of people, including a lot of men who have been very effeminized through decades of propaganda from the TV, now social media, radio, Hollywood, movies, talk shows. Their churches have been a big part of the feminization of our nation. And once upon a time in our country, women referred to their husbands as Lord. They called their husbands Lord. Because we're a Christian nation, right? And in the book of Peter, in the epistle of Peter, I'm sorry, and I believe it might be First Peter chapter 2 or Second Peter. I forgot what chapter, but it's in Peter where he encourages the women to have the character of Sarah, even referring to her husband as Lord. Now, what we have here in America is boss babe culture, right? Boss babe culture and whore culture is the end result of women's rights. And women are eternally, a lot of women are eternally envious of the male biospirit that men are kind of the, not kind of, but they're the leaders. They're the ones that go to war. They're the ones that head big companies. They're the ones that are looked to as leaders by people, including women. And so there's this eternal envy. And what it is that envy stems from rejection of God's hierarchy that he laid out. You know, God over Christ, Christ over man, man over woman. And that's all that is. It's a rejection of the hierarchy. Hierarchy is good. Hierarchy is biblical. Hierarchy is a normal way of life. Equality is a false god. So no, I don't believe women are equal to men, except for salvation. Okay? And we need to roll back. One of the big steps in order to return our society to a patriarchal society is removing women's right to vote. That's one of the things that I would implement in this country if I was the leader, the ruler of this country, is women's right to vote. Okay? And in order to go back to the natural order of things, you have to make decisions that are going to appear extreme to people. Almost anything traditional today appears extreme to people because people have been so conditioned and effeminized, right? They've been so conditioned and effeminized. And when women rule over men, it is a sign of judgment on that nation and society. And what men have to do is they have to take back the rightful place in God's hierarchy. And when you do that, you don't ask permission. You just do it. And how do you do that? First of all, of course, you have to be living righteously, right? Because mightier is a man who control his passions, his temper, his passions, whether that's sex, money, drugs, rock and roll, whatever, than a man who could conquer a city. What you have to understand as a man is that it is the woman that follows you. You don't follow the woman. Too many men go around following women. Too many men go around following women. You see what, the whole simp culture of men simping for women, right? And that, I mean, you go to church, any church USA, I guarantee you, most churches, 95% of them, it is a simp fest. Simp fest. The pastors encourage the men to simp for their wives. It's almost like they tell the men to submit to their wives. Now, again, these are Protestant churches. In the Catholic Church, you won't see that. I haven't seen that. So, again, the order of God's natural law, the divine positive law, is God, Christ, man, woman. See, women have a valuable role in as being the helpmate of the man, the helpmeet. But at the same time, that helpmeet is submissive in total subjection to her husband, right? Now, there are in your daily practical life, in order to reassert patriarchy, there's some very subtle things you could do that people won't even notice. I've always said there are certain things that you don't speak of in mixed company. There are certain things you don't speak of in mixed company. Today's modern woman loves to talk about inappropriate things with men. So one of the ways you reassert patriarchy is you do not engage in conversations that are inappropriate for mixed company with a woman. If she baits you into it, you just ignore it. Ignore her. Those are ways you reassert patriarchy, right? That's how it used to be. It used to be that it was considered impolite and uncouth to talk about certain things in mixed company. With the advent of the proliferation of women in the workplace, that barrier started to break down to the point where that barrier is not there at all anymore. And what's amazing to me in the corporate world, you have a lot of laws, regarding sexual harassment and all this stuff. But when I go to work, it's like nobody even reads that thing. That's how much inappropriate stuff you hear at work from men and women because they've gotten so comfortable with each other. Well, that's a sign of matriarchy because women, believe it or not, like to talk about sex more than men. So it's a sign of matriarchy. The women are talking about their agenda. They're talking about their worldview, and men are engaging when it's inappropriate. But the way you reassert patriarchy, you don't engage. The problem is weak men who are led by their libido dominante, they give in and they enjoy these conversations. And it's reasserting matriarchy. You've just submitted yourself to the woman. Okay? You also have to be harsh with women in this way. Women love to talk about their feelings and their personal problems. A lot of times, And you as a man, if you're not their husband or their brother or their son or any relation to them, you don't need to hear it. You need to let them know that in no uncertain terms that they need to find another woman, a mature woman in the Lord, and go seek godly counsel. Don't become a sponge, a sounding board for women's problems, their emotions. Again, it reasserts patriarchy because women, when they feel free to express themselves just around to men that aren't their husband, that aren't their brother or father, it's because they're pushing their matriarchal power. They demand that you hear out their emotions and their problems. This is something you have to stop. You have to say no, right? Because we want this to be a man's world. Because men are the leaders that God has called us to be. So we need to make this a man's world again. See, the conversations at a workplace should be centered around the work. Okay, sports, right? These are man conversations. Things that are non-emotional, right? And what women have done successfully is turn the workplace into an emotional place, a place that is led by emotions, right? They've made sports about that. They've made the workplace about that. A man's world is more dispassionate, right? But we're supposed to make this more of a dispassionate world. Now, these are ways that you can reassert patriarchy in your own life, having boundaries with women, having boundaries. And I've told people before, like I've told women before at work, and I'm polite about it. You can be polite. You don't have to be a jerk off. You should always try to be polite. I've told women before, listen, I don't feel comfortable talking about things in a mixed company. I just was raised different than I was. I was raised, you don't talk about certain things in mixed company. And the breaking down of that barrier is because the flood of matriarchy broke it down like a wave breaks down a wall, keeps hitting, you know, keeps hitting. Anyways, women's rights has been a big, huge failure. And the first rollback I would make is ending women's suffrage. Anyways, hail victory, hail America.